Somewhere in Time. This, in my opinion, is a timeless romance film that not many people have heard of. Not just because it came out in 1980, because even at the time, upon its release, the film did not do well at the box office. And critics tore it up saying it was overly romantic, the time travel was paradoxical, devoid of logic, that it was out of touch with the audience. All of this is objectively true. Though I will say the overly romantic part, that's a little bit more subjective. I feel like most men would probably call most chick flicks overly romantic. I could understand that perspective, but I want to offer my own perspective and experience with this film. But for those of you who don't know, Somewhere in Time is a time travel romance that came out in 1980 about a young playwright played by Christopher Reeves who is going through a bit of a rough patch in his professional and personal life. So he decides to hit the road and go on a solo weekend getaway. He stops at a very old grand hotel and decides to stop there spontaneously. While he is there, he wanders into a room where they have the history of the hotel like a mini museum when he sees a photograph of a mysterious young woman. He becomes completely enamored with her, and when he sees there is no information under her photograph, he finds a hotel staff member and inquires about her. After he gets some information on her, he becomes completely obsessed and more in love during his research. But then he begins to see inexplicable connections to her as if he knew her or something. Then he realizes he met her as an old woman, which you see her in the beginning of the film. And it kind of all becomes more clear when the protagonist starts to make these connections as well, that he already met her. And when he meets her, she clearly knows him. So it starts to really mess with the protagonist's head. So he just becomes obsessed with the idea and he starts to delve into self-hypnosis time travel. And it's super straightforward the way this movie handles time travel. It's just self-hypnosis, self-immersion. It's not really the point of this movie. It's not overly convoluted. They don't try to add a bunch of context, a bunch of science behind it. There's no huge exposition scene of how it's going to work, kind of like in Endgame. And fun fact, I don't know if you recall, but in Endgame, when Hulk is explaining the time travel to the Avengers, he actually mentions Somewhere in Time when he's talking about all films who have gotten time travel wrong. So especially in this modern day, most people would roll their eyes and think it's lazy writing, and maybe it is. It's certainly not the most unique form of time travel in the genre of sci-fi, but I feel like the point of this movie is the romance and the fact that it is so old-fashioned and very sincere with the way they portray the romance. The movie's about the overwhelming sense of love and passion you feel when you're just starting to fall in love with someone. And the way it portrays it is in a very unique and very unapologetic about being so sincere, so wholesome. Yeah, it's just something you don't really see anymore. And I think since it's such a specific flavor, I can see why certain or most critics back in 1980 found it overly romantic. Because it's just, I don't know, it's just it's unapologetic, it's bold in that way. Even though it's not doing anything crazy and new and original, it's just being so romantic. And I feel like these days, the only time you see that type of wholesome romance is in anime. It's just crazy to think how this film was out of touch in 1980, If you're younger in age, I think only someone who is personally going through the beginning stages of romance can really get something from this film. Or perhaps if you're just an old soul or open-minded cinephile. I think though this film is incredibly romantic and a chick flick, many men will find some connection with this portrayal of romance, at least men that are more in touch with their feelings and with art, like the protagonist, Richard, played by Christopher Reeves. He's struck by the beauty of a woman and everything changes for him. He's literally ready to just drop everything for her. He becomes kind of obsessive about it. When us men fall in love, we tend to be very aggressive that way. And I mean, men are aggressive. That's a very inherent trait we all have. And it's not always in a negative or violent way. You could be aggressive like that, where you fall in love and it's just really intense and you're just willing to do anything for her, As a man, when you look at the movie from that lens, it's not just a chick flick anymore, There's a realistic connection you can make with Richard in a very 1970s sort of way. It's not exactly how a man would act now, or at the very least, understandable. Speaking of Christopher Reeves, the acting in this movie is all great, honestly. Christopher Reeves had just did Superman, 3 years before. He had just did Superman, and here he is in this weird little romance film, pouring his heart out. And again, sincere. That's just the way I could describe this movie. He's just really putting it out there, putting his emotions, being vulnerable. Jane Seymour, she's so attractive, so beautiful in this film. I mean, I understand why Richard was gonna risk it all for her, and because, yeah, she's beautiful, and her acting is amazing. Her portrayal of Elise is so good. She's such a gentle, graceful character, but also very curious, and she has like a lust for her life. And Christopher Plummer is the antagonist of the film. He's a legend, you know. He's just as severe and intimidating as he always is in every film. But what's really cool for these actors is that years later, after this movie found its audience through home video, cable television, it became a bit of a cult classic, and even a fan club was formed, which is so crazy because it's just a little time travel period piece romance, you know. Yeah, a little fan club was born out of this, and they meet up at the shooting location for the Grand Hotel in the film. And yeah, they gained some popularity, some funding. In the 90s, they had Christopher Reeve, Jane Seymour. The main cast, they all went at some point. They did go many times, and it's just great to see. There's footage of them, you know, experiencing the audience. It's like a little mini Comic-Con, you know, just a bunch of old white people. It's just cool that they felt the love, you know. Even though the critics tore it apart, and the audience wasn't there at the box office, years later, they felt the love and they felt that validation for the work they put in, you know, and all that passion. So you may be wondering how a young guy like me knows about this film. Well, that brings me to my personal attachment of this film, the music by John Barry. I grew up listening to the score. My dad showed this movie to my mom when they were dating in 1990. And I don't know how he found this film because he was like a horror cinephile. So I don't know how he came across this movie, such a wholesome, bright movie. And so he totally rizzed her up, as the kids say. And it worked, you know. So that's like a very significant movie in my household growing up. I never saw this movie completely growing up, but I always heard it. And the score just always stood with me, and it moved me as a kid. And as a preteen, as a teen, like the movie has always been significant in my life, even though I hadn't really had a connection to the viewing of the film. And again, I've loved that score since I was a teen. I mean, my whole life. But like, I obviously as a kid, I'm not really putting the DVD on, you know, myself. I'm a little kid. But as a teen, technology advancing and all that, on my iPhone, I remember downloading the score. And then just, you know, it's been on regular rotation since I was a teenager. And I have seen the movie as a teenager, but I never like fully got engrossed in it until more recently. The score is just so graceful. It's like romantically epic. It's sad. It's nostalgic. Like there's like a very poignant, like nostalgic feeling in the score. It's just such a perfect score for this film. And it's a truly unique score in general. I love classical music. And what I love is that Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, that song is a significant part of the movie. And I love it because that song fits perfectly in the score. If it sounds like if John Barry wrote that song, and he didn't. And it kind of just speaks to how good John Barry's score is, that it sounds completely fluent with that legendary song from a legendary composer, you know? There's a main theme for the movie somewhere in time, but that song by Rachmaninoff, it's very specific to the characters in the movie. I just love that aspect of the film. I really miss when movies would have distinct iconic scores or themes. Like these days, the only time you hear an iconic theme, it's from big action movies. And I mean, you've seen me in my channel. I have no problem with superhero films, Star Wars, all that. So it's not a dig at those movies. It's more like a dig at the current state of Hollywood and film, because why is it only there? Why can't it just be everywhere? I will say that is something I did love about La La Land, that there is a distinct I mean the score is great, obviously, but there is distinct iconic romance themes in that movie. Anyways, so to wrap this up, I highly recommend this movie to everyone, but I want to reach out more specifically to younger people who are old souls like myself. And it's crazy because in 1980, this film was out of its time then. It was a modern movie from that time that belonged in the past. And it's just such a fitting type of film. It's a fitting name to have that type of reputation. So I just hope now in 2024, this film could find a new audience with this generation and continue to be timeless, you know? But yeah, if you've seen this movie, if you love this movie, let me know your guys' thoughts, your connection to this film. And if you're not, if you've never heard of this, hopefully I've swayed you to try to watch this film. And if you do, let me know in the comments your experience. I know it'll be jarring for the modern audience, for the modern young person. But I think if you have an open mind and you really allow yourself to be immersed, I don't know. I think it's worth a watch. But yeah, thanks for watching.